Hi again, welcome back to All Things Data by 1000ml. Here we are back with Season 3, Episode 4. Today we'll be talking largely about contract management and how it could affect your business. So without further ado, let's get going.
Hi Victor, could you talk to me about contract management?
Sure. So as you might imagine, everything we've been talking about is with sort of the lens of NLP and AI. And contract management, contract lifecycle management, or contract AI, any of those catch-all terms, really is a way to apply either automation, AI, or NLP to the workflow that is contracts. And I mean, that generally can be anything in your order to cash process, because really contracting is a huge part of that. Whether it is that you're talking to a vendor and you're trying to buy something from them, or you're in fact selling something to somebody else, you want to make sure that you get the best deal value out of these contracts, that you either find ways to save cost, especially if it's on your own side that you're selling something, or generate revenue. That's obviously another way. And you want to make sure that things are on side with your legal counsel, your legal liability, the compliance, and the risk appetite of your organization, right? And generally, like when you have a bit of this automation, what often happens is it makes your entire firm, especially the people receiving and handing out contracts, it makes them more productive and agile. So you're quite honestly just able to do more with less people. It often can lead to a lot less data entry in your organization. You know, as contracts come in, you no longer really need to, it's not that you're not going to look at them, but you don't need to transcribe them. That's a big gain. You know, like it's often been the job of the very junior people or interns at an organization, but why not elevate them to do something more important even, or get them to do more critical thinking? I mean, that's really
Right.
the purpose of people, is critical thinking, much more so than an AI. And then finally, contract management is part of the ethos that 1000ml has, and part of the Apogee suite is comprised of a contract management suite, and that is called Zenith. Zenith itself is looking at your contracts and extracting all the material information, whether that is specific to clauses or parts of clauses. Let's say items in a clause, so say a date or a vacation pay or something like that. You know, it can also extract and standardize and join tables across many documents and many pages. And of course, when introduced into your workflow, as things are either ingested into your data lake or repository or your ERP, it can augment all of the data that you do have there, so that you get a much better view of the entirety of your sales or receivables process.
This product Zenith sounds amazing. I mean, it can do all that. So within these contracts, is there an opportunity for cost savings or revenue generation?
Definitely. That's often one of the big reasons why people look to automate these sort of workflows. In the world of contract lifecycle management and automating workflows, you very often want to make sure that your contracts are, apples to apples all across the board, so that you have a consistency across the entirety of your contract landscape. You want to make sure that your clauses are very similar, that you're not going to be caught by surprise by anything, and of course you want to catalog all these things, right? So in terms of cost savings, now imagine that you're buying something from another firm. There will be all kinds of clauses, warrants, and basically risk that is embedded into those contracts that has stuff like discounts will be available if payments are made at this point. So often, I may have a net 60 agreement with a client, but they're willing to give me a discount if I pay within a week of receiving the thing. Because of net present value of money, you kind of want to get your money faster. I mean, they could do something with their money prior to us, right? And in terms of revenue generation, you could be looking at ways to actually increase your revenue if you put out the contracts in certain situations. You may come up into multiples of a contract, or the company who's buying from you is reaching a scale at which they are now supposed to be in a different tier, let's say, right? And without really having a handle on all your contracts, it's hard to really guess at where everybody is and understand the reporting or the analytics and insights that does come from all these contracts. I think Deloitte or Gartner very recently said something like a good contract management solution can yield 5 to 40% more in deal value. So that's a huge statistic. Yeah, I mean, like 5% is a nice amount of money, and most people in business know that if you can find 5 places where you can gain 15% in either accrual of value, so revenue generation, or cutting costs, you basically doubled your business. It's a rule of 72 kind of thing. So if you can do that a few times over, you're going to make a lot more money.
Contracts are legal in nature. Does this impact liability and risk?
Definitely. I mean, the inherent quality of a contract is that it is a legal understanding between my firm and your firm, where there is some form of compensation going back and forth, whether that's a product or money or a bartering system, whatever it is, right? So I'm exposed if I don't deliver on my promise in the contract, just as you are exposed if you don't deliver on your promise. I mean, if you're the one buying the promises, you're going to pay, really. But if we're talking about no money exchange and it was a bartering agreement, you'd be saying, I'm willing to give you widget X and you have to give me widget Y. And there is some stipulations that say widget X is going to have this kind of features, it's going to be delivered in this kind of way, it's going to, have all these things. So you largely want to look through these contracts and read all of them to understand how you might be exposed. And that's generally what you want to know is, how could I be exposed and how do I ensure that I not only know the exposure, but I cover that exposure. I want to know that in case something happens, worst case scenario, I'm covered in a way. So that's sort of looking at the risk appetite of an organization or its legal liability. You kind of start looking at all of the documents that have gone through. You look through the clauses and you highlight, because you have a system that can understand these clauses and what they mean, you start highlighting things where they may be disadvantageous to you, and you can bring those forth, and then you have an opportunity to put something in place that allows you to deal with that risk. It's not that you're now going to get a chance to renegotiate, although there are renegotiation periods in many contracts, but the fact that means that you're not going to be exposed and something's not going to hit you in the face at the last moment when you're not ready for it. So yes, definitely, with an automated solution that can do a lot of the air quote reading and understanding of the contracts and language therein, there's definitely an opportunity to reduce all legal liability and risk in there for sure.
You mentioned automation, and this is a big part of it as well too. Is contract management a way to optimize your staffing while increasing automation?
Well, yeah, I mean, that sort of ends up being the early crux of a lot of these solutions. Is you'll often find a smaller organization that is very paperwork heavy because of contracts. Maybe they do a lot of small medium deals, but there's still a contract that goes in between those small medium deals, whether it's a several $100 or a several $100,000 or several $100 million deal. Like, the contract just grows in size because of more clauses, really, right?
Absolutely.
But you still got contracts. If you want to ingest all those contracts into some repository, let's say it is that you're using an ERP, because that's a very normal way to deal with your customers, really, is to have them in ERP. You would often, if you're going to do a really good job of understanding your risk and your obligations, you're going to want some data entry people there to look at these contracts, pull out the pieces of information that you deem are really important, and put them into your database. Your database being your ERP in this instance. So this is a job that I've done when I was a late teen as well. I did it in the accounts side, so receivable and payable, which is no different. So there we got purchase orders and invoices, and we would key things into a system, and eventually it got picked up and paid. So this is kind of akin to that. Is there's some data entry person who's often doing that in accounts. The blind spot that most organizations have is you don't always have somebody who's doing this for all contracts, right? So in terms of automation, yes, it makes a lot of sense to help the people that are doing this even in accounts, because why do you want them having to do a repetitive kind of blind task when you could probably get them to do some more critical thinking? I mean, you're paying people for their brains, you're not paying them for their hands. Exactly. So you want to get them to a place where they can use their brains to a higher capacity, right? And I mean, that's a whole organizational and digital change, a change management thing, but still, it's very possible that using them for a higher value task rather than using them for data entry could yield a lot more benefit for your organization. And a good contract management system, especially one like Zenith that can extract all the material information in a contract and in generally any of these agreements, helps your whole account side and your legal side have a real oversight over all of your contractual obligations and the people who have bought from you, their contractual obligations. So it could lead to, this is one of those scary things, it could lead to less people being employed at your organization if you have the thought that I'm just going to replace the data entry people, or it could very well lead to we buy something that is going to do the job, the repetitive task over and over really well, and it's probably going to do it at incidents of less mistakes. And then I can put these people to use doing something other. Maybe it is that I'm growing them into accountants, or I'm growing them into controllers, or whatever kind of like their path forward is. And just let the automation run itself at that point. It's a system, so just let it go. Yeah. And I mean, that ends up being sort of what Zenith really is all about. It's the purpose that we created this tool, was really that we saw many places in the marketplace where there is a need for extracting clauses, understanding contracts, agreements, invoices, purchase orders, all kinds of legal clauses and things that, you often won't read yourself. Imagine the typical terms and conditions on a website. There's a lot of stuff in there, and almost everybody just goes, yep. Right?
I agree, check the mark, and move on, right?
Exactly, right? So
guilty.
in business, it's a little tougher to do that. So you can't just agree to anything that's on the other side. So you do have to have legal go through it.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, imagine a world in which you ingest all of these clauses. You know that out of possibly, let's say, 100 clauses that are in that document, 94 of them, so 94% of the clauses, are just like standard boilerplate, nothing special about them, and your contract management system understands that. So then it highlights 6 clauses and says, you might want to have legal look at these. So now you've cut your legal cost down by maybe not 94%, but at least the amount of work that they're given is 94% less. So Zenith does that very well, and it integrates right into your ERP, and it integrates into your workflow for contract management and really for augmenting all of the data that goes into your repositories. That's the whole purpose of Zenith, and one of the many parts of Apogee Suite that we market and sell.
Very innovative.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that just about wraps up today's episode of All Things Data. Keep tuning in every week. We're gonna keep going on about topics about NLP, AI, and of course, anything data.